Hello, my name is Jillian Fitzmorris, and I am a school social worker and a mom, and I'm also someone who has had a parent incarcerated and who has been in foster care when I was younger. Today I have 3 goals, and that is to share my story, to help other kids who may have gone through a similar situation like myself, and then the last one is to motivate others who may work in the field or just people in general to make a positive difference in the world. So I guess I'll dive in. This is my first time. Some people may know me. I'm Jillian Rose Proctor is my maiden name, and I was born to a U.S. Army veteran, Gordon Keith Proctor, and my mom, Rosalinda Swatoy Hernais, was from the Philippines, and my dad was a businessman, but he was also in the U.S. Army. And let's see, here I am with my dad, and here is me on my first birthday with my mom and my dad, and we were probably in Spain. I was born in Benidorm, Alicante, Spain. I am a U.S. citizen, yes. And then here's my dad, and I was probably around 5 years old, 5 or 6 probably in this picture. So, those of you might not know all this complicated story, but I'm going to dive in. Okay. When I was 5 years old, we were living in the Philippines because my dad traveled for his work, and that's where my mom's family was from. They had met in Europe. She was his secretary, and they fell in love. They had me, and then they moved to the Philippines. Then my younger brother, Jack and Jill, was born there. But then my parents decided they wanted to raise their children in the States because my dad's an American, and everyone looks to coming here as a great thing. So my parents decided that my little brother, he was younger, 4 years younger than me, he would stay with my mom, and then I would go with my dad. We flew into an airport in Detroit, Michigan, and what I remember is seeing 2 men looking in suits, men in black style. As soon as we got off the airplane, they came and they handcuffed my dad. They had guns. I was really freaked out. I was 5 years old, had never been on a plane before, had never been without my parents before. They arrested him in front of me. I didn't get to say goodbye to him. I really had no idea what was going on. Later I'll find out that my dad was kind of like Leonardo DiCaprio in the Catch Me If You Can movie, an international man of mystery. The Riviera Romeo has 12 children all over the world who thankfully I've met through social media and whatnot. Thankful for all of them, but he was a very, just like a character, like a big fish, like that movie. His stories, you'd never think were real, but they're real. Continuing with mine, I'm at the airport, Detroit, Michigan, 5 years old. My father gets arrested by the FBI. I'm immediately taken by some people and brought to a car. I'd never really worn a seatbelt before because in the Philippines they had jeepneys. I don't remember too much except for screaming for my dad as they took him away. I think he said, "You'll be okay," something like that. I didn't get a hug or kiss him goodbye. They took me, put me in a car. We drove through a huge city. I remember screaming and crying and hitting at the seats, just not knowing what to do, scared. Only other things I really remember from that time were that I guess my dad was taken to prison, and for some reason, I'm not sure why, but I think because where we were supposed to go was Kansas. I think he ended up going to a prison in Leavenworth, Kansas, and so my foster care experience kind of began. My first place was in Detroit, Michigan. It was more like probably a group home. I remember other kids being there. Those foster parents were actually pretty kind. I had kind of scratched them and whatnot because I wanted to get away. I thought I was being, kidnapped. But they were kind. They gave me coloring books and things like that. I remember holding a little hippo at night kind of crying. It used to play, I think, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. But I just remember being real scared, wanting my mom, wanting my dad, and not knowing what the heck was going on. Fast forward, I can't really remember how I got from Detroit to Kansas, but in Kansas I was placed in my second foster care home, and it was with a young man, probably in his 30s, and then his mother, maybe in her 50s. They were nice enough. They had a really dark, small, little tiny house in Kincaid, Kansas, I believe. I stayed with them, I'm not sure how long, but I do know I was removed because they found out that that man had either HIV or AIDS. I'm fine, but that's why I was removed from that placement. Then I was put in another placement with probably a couple in their 40s. That was my most traumatic, probably, time. I don't know why, but they weren't very nice people. They would yell a lot. I think they owned a store, and so they always had me kind of cleaning and working when I didn't go to school. I was in kindergarten. And then I'd have to sleep in this room with other kids. But there was also a baby in the room, and the baby would cry from time to time. And every time the baby cried, that couple, one of them would storm in and scream at me and tell me to stop hurting the baby. And I was not near that baby. I was in my bed, praying just to be with my family. And so, yeah, I got blamed for a lot of things there, and I don't really know what their issue was, but they were mean. Yeah, there's just some things I'm not going to dive into that happened there. It wasn't a good time in my life. Thankfully, I was an angel at school, or the only Asian in a little kindergarten classroom in Kincaid, Kansas. And my kindergarten teacher, Marilyn Danley Lancaster, decided to take me in. It was kind of a dramatic turn of events. One night, that house, the baby was crying. That family kicks me outside, throws out my clothes. Not that I had much, but threw me out. It was dark. It was dark outside. I was 5 years old. They said, we can't have her anymore. She causes trouble. And somehow, I think whoever, KVC or whatever the foster care people were back in 1990 or 89, something, they found my kindergarten teacher, and she said, well, if she has nowhere to go, I'll take her. So that wonderful woman took me in, and I stayed with her until my dad was released from prison. And then my mom, and that's a whole different story, was able to come over from the Philippines. There were some immigration issues because my dad was a playboy and had been married to another woman, and wasn't, I don't know, annulled or their divorce or her death. But so I was in foster care about 2 years. Yeah, not some of my best memories, but I made it. School was a safe place for me. I was thankful to know some kind kids, some kind teachers, and it got me through it. And that's part of my goal today, was also to share to my teacher friends out there that you really do make a difference in kids' lives. I know we as educators are overwhelmed with too high caseloads, too many kids in our classrooms, not enough resources, all these things expected from us, and lower salary and little time, but what you do makes a huge difference in kids' lives, even if you don't know it. And I'm also making this video because I've had some colleagues lately who've made a difference in my life just by being very kind and understanding, and I thank them for that. So moving on. Foster care, yeah, not a good time, but I made it out. My dad had ended up being arrested and served about 2 years in prison for like con man, business fraud kind of things. He made up Encyclopedia Britannica to sell it to some of the Arabic people, but he never delivered on the product. He was a very intelligent man, and he really did work for the real Encyclopedia Britannica, but then he tried to venture out and create his own business, but ended up ultimately scamming people. So that's why he was arrested and served his time. Thankfully, at least, he was a loving father to me. I don't know about the other children he abandoned, but to me and my brother, he was pretty loving most of the time. He had a lot of anger issues, a lot of anger, but generally either very loving or angry. So that's another thing as a social worker that I work on with kids, is helping them manage their emotions. And what do you do if you live in a home where there's nonstop yelling? Because generally when there's yelling, kids don't really get removed from a home ever. It's more physical things. So what can you do to kind of break that cycle, to take deep breaths, mindfulness, anything to help you kind of cope? And I especially like working with my high school students because I feel like those kiddos in tough situations are closer to creating their own future. So with incarceration, I never really got to visit my dad in prison. I've visited other family members who've gone to jail, but I never went to prison to see my dad, and I understand why my kindergarten teacher didn't want me to go there for that experience, but it was a bummer to not see either one of my parents for 2 years. My mom did write letters and send pictures from the Philippines and vice versa, but it was a very hard time. And I don't know how, but I'm very thankful that somehow I was resilient through it and was reunited with my family, and ended up, growing up, doing fine, getting involved in high school and doing all the sports and activities, thanks to good friends, to my friends' parents who were supportive, to my mom who worked very hard to provide. And then anyways, my next one probably will be about drugs and alcohol, but for today we'll keep it foster care and incarceration. So I ended up going to college, Pittsburgh State. I did drop out when my dad passed away. That will be the drug and alcohol video. But then I went back to Pitt State and then to KU and graduated with my bachelor's in social work and then my master's in social work. And I kind of do what I do, and I love what I do because I feel like I can really make a difference in kids' lives. I love working in education. I love the community that we have with our fellow teachers. They're all amazing people. And so with that, my message for anyone who's been through a similar situation is you can overcome it, you can make a different future for yourself, and you don't have to be your parents. You don't have to be the circumstances or the situation you grew up in. You can make your own future, ask for help if you need it, believe in yourself, don't give up. So here I wanted to give a couple resources: KVC Kansas, Adopt Kansas Kids, and TFI Family Services. I guess at any given day there are more than 500,000 kids in the foster care system, and then in a child's lifetime there are more than 10 million children currently who've had a family member be incarcerated. And I feel like that's something maybe we don't talk about because it's kind of hush-hush, but parents do break the law, caregivers do, and they go to jail and they're gone, and it's hard for those kids who are left behind. And talking about it and just supporting them and loving them can really make a difference in a child and their success as they get older, and then look back on what happened to them as youth. Save Kids of Incarcerated Parents is another good resource, and then Sesame Street and Communities has a whole bunch of coping with incarceration resources. So if you're an educator or someone just interested in that, check that out. Otherwise, I'll look at my notes. I guess I just want people to know that you can overcome kind of challenging situations with love and support from people. My educator friends, coaches, teachers, parents, friends of your classmates, parents, you all make a difference. And daily interactions, can really have a long-term effect when you're that consistent, nice and kind and caring person. So thank you for all of those people in my life and to my family, and thank you for listening.